Welcome to True You Ministries with pastoral counselor Stacy Echeverria. Stacy is a licensed pastoral counselor whose own journey has taught her the importance of having a safe place to discuss the harder issues of life. We are grateful that you've joined us for this week's broadcast. You can learn more about Stacy and her heartfelt desire to help people, much like yourself, who may be at a place of pain and confusion by calling her at 626-461-3344. That's 626-461-3344. Or feel free to email her at info@trueyouministries.com. And now, here's Stacy. We are back for part 2. Thank you all for watching and listening. With me again is Reese Crane. We will be continuing our discussion today on secrets, lies, and redemption. Hey, Reese, how you doing?
Doing good. Yourself? I'm
doing great. Yeah, I'm glad you're back for part 2.
Good to be here.
Yeah, part 1 was amazing. We were talking about Judah and, Joseph and sexual brokenness within generations as well. And that was an amazing topic, to talk about and get into all of that. And it can seem heavy at times for people, right? So in this segment, we just wanted to talk a little bit more about the hope that's available to those of you that may be struggling, who maybe you have family members that have been struggling. Maybe you're experiencing some betrayal trauma as well. This doesn't just impact the person that's struggling. This impacts partners, spouses, children, and generations, to come. So the work that Reese and I have been called to is to help individuals, number one, get free from the bondage that they're in and walk in the wholeness and restoration that's available to them in Yeshua Messiah, right?
Sure.
And to walk in that freedom that's available to us and be able to change the trajectory of their family and generations to come.
Right.
And so we touched a little bit on Abraham, Jacob and his sons, and Judah as well. And so we're going to delve into a little bit more about, the hope and the promise that's available when we decide to move forward in what the Lord wants for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a beautiful story when you get to the end. It's messed up and chaotic, especially when we follow the story of Judah.
Yeah.
It's very chaotic, and just talking about the fact that these things kind of come full circle within generations, as you mentioned. We have Abraham and Sarah. She can't conceive or isn't conceiving, even though the word of the Lord came and said you would.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's going to happen this way, so go have sex with Hagar.
Right.
Okay, and we all know what ensued after that over the last 2,500 years.
Yes.
Or more. Maybe, something like that.
And
but then we have Isaac and Rebecca. I don't know, nothing much going on there until their twins show up.
Yeah.
Until Jacob and Esau show up. And then we see the dividing lines within the family. We see the mother's enmeshment with Jacob.
Yeah.
We see, being a daddy's boy and the real rough and tough outdoorsman. And he finds real solace with his father.
Yeah.
In that. And then we see the breeding grounds there of deception with the mother and Jacob, and why is she doing that, and what's her backstory, right?
Right.
And then we follow Jacob through 21 years of getting married, being deceived in his own right, giving the firstborn daughter that he wasn't in love with,
right,
and he has to marry her.
And
he finally gets 7 years later, gets the wife of his dreams, his other first cousin, which is really what it boiled down to. But then she can't conceive anything.
Right.
But the first wife can, but then she stops conceiving. And then there's 2 maidservants that come into play.
Right.
And Jacob starts having sex with those. So there's 4 women now.
Yeah.
Finally, Rachel, the woman that he loved, conceives and gives birth to Joseph.
Yeah.
And this Technicolor Dreamcoat story, right? You're on Broadway. And then his brothers sell him off.
Yeah.
Because they're just jealous.
Yeah.
They have no connection with their father, but he has everything.
Yeah.
And now one of those sons, we follow the story through his journey of having to carry that secret. And then not only does he carry that secret with him, he gets married and he loses two sons because they disobeyed God, and he loses his wife. And then he ends up on a roadway looking over, seeing a prostitute, and all of the weight of the pain of his life, the family secrets, the grief, the loss, everything he's carrying in that moment makes him look over and says, that would feel really good right about now.
Yeah.
But he doesn't just go and have sex with a prostitute so that he can feel good and escape his pain for a while. He trades in his staff because he doesn't have any money on him. He trades in his staff, but he also trades in his signet, which was the seal.
Yeah.
If you would melt wax and you would put it around sheepskin paper and you wrote a note to somebody, but that seal was burned into it, just like they did, in the days of Camelot. You'd see it on TV, but the kings would do that.
Right.
All of that was his identity.
Yeah.
And so the metaphor here is, I don't have anything to pay you with, but what I will release to you is my identity. I'll let go of that. And the staff was very important in the job that he had. He protected his sheep from wolves and snakes, and he was able to maneuver on all the rocky ground over there in Israel with his staff. He doesn't have that anymore. And the signet, he's not able to communicate effectively anymore. Who's this from? It's from Judah. Well, it doesn't have a seal on it. Right? Well, trust me. Right?
Yeah.
And then after all of that brokenness, after all of that grief, we get to the place where God is going to do something, in my opinion, is absolutely spectacular.
Yeah.
And the story continues in Genesis 49.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I want you to keep in mind, because when I read this, it really jumped off the pages at me. And maybe it will for you. Maybe it will for somebody else. Maybe it won't. But for me, when I read this, I saw the thread from literally Genesis to Revelation happen in just a few words.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I have available. I'd love to share it with our audience.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I do. So,
great.
yeah. So let's do this. And before, well, you know what? Let me just share what the Lord gave me too, with regard to Abraham as well, right? Abraham lied about who Sarah was when he was asked.
Right.
Twice.
Yeah.
Twice. Not once, but twice. So he lied, right? So you think about this, right? With, what goes around comes around too, Abraham lied twice. Sarah, in all her wisdom, wanted to help God out with the promise, because she didn't really believe, because she laughed when she heard that she was going to get pregnant, right? She laughed because they were both in old age. And it's that whole thing of, it goes right back to the garden where the serpent says to Eve, did God really say? So doubt comes in. And that's been a thread from the beginning. It's been a thread all the way through. Did God really say? So doubt enters in, right? She doubted him. It can't possibly happen. So, in their infinite wisdom, they're helping God out.
Right.
And, and in so doing, fast forward a few thousand years, and we've got what we've got going on in Israel right now. So that's a whole other topic. But we have the hindsight of 2020, right? We have that. We can go back and go, oh my goodness. But they didn't know what was going to come.
Right.
Although, Abraham was promised, all these descendants, all of them. And, as infinite as the number of stars and the grains of sand, did not believe God on that one.
Right.
So let's help him out. But anyway, yeah. So that's like a whole other topic. But let me go ahead and read, Genesis 49, 8-10. Judah, you are the one whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down to you. In reading that, I remember the dream that Joseph shared.
Right.
Judah, a lion's cub, with the prey, my son, you have gone high up. He stooped down, he crouched like a lion, and like a lion, who dares rouse him? The scepter of royalty shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until Shiloh, the Messiah, the peaceful one, comes, and to him shall be the obedience of peoples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot in there.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the dream,
Yeah.
and that the father's sons would bow down,
Yeah.
Joseph had that same dream.
Yeah.
And Judah is a lion's cub.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see that, like we mentioned in the last segment, that Judah was the bloodline of Jesus.
Yeah.
And he's known, when you hear it in Revelation, that the lion of the tribe of Judah is now taking his rightful place.
Yeah.
And so all of this is a foreshadowing of Jesus coming. And it's not just him coming the first time.
Right.
And they do use Shiloh, and Shiloh was a place used for where they set up the tabernacle eventually, right under Moses.
Mm-hmm.
So there is that concept of that, but it's a bigger concept here. Mm-hmm. But the thing that really stuck out to me was we are talking about Judah giving his staff and signet as a pledge for him to pay a prostitute.
Yeah.
So he gives this stuff freely. Now he thinks, I'm going to come back and pay her and I'll get this stuff back, but then she's not there.
Right.
He's lost 2 major articles that speak to his identity.
Yeah.
That speak to his manhood, that speak to his work,
mm-hmm.
and all of that kind of stuff. All of that stuff is wrapped up in that staff,
mm-hmm.
and all that's wrapped up in that signet. But I think it's beautiful because what's happening here in these verses is Jacob is blessing all of his children.
Yeah.
And some don't get a really good blessing.
Right.
But Judah was still one that traded in Joseph. Judah is this one that traded in his staff and his signet because he couldn't pay a prostitute the cash.
I know.
Right?
I know.
Why isn't he getting a stupid blessing, right? Look at Reuben and because he slept with the concubine and he gets nothing. Like, okay.
Well, his father's concubine, no less.
Right. His father's concubine, right?
Who does that?
A couple of brothers get a pretty rotten blessing out of the deal, but Judah's no different.
No.
Right?
Right.
He's like, his sons are derelict and they die. All of this stuff is following him, and it's really no different than the brokenness that everybody else has. But there's this beautiful picture of God's redemption. And who's not to say that all of the other brothers at one time or another before they died, hopefully, they found some spiritual revival in their life, with the God Almighty.
Right.
But this is this beautiful thing. Look at halfway through that scripture where it says, the scepter of royalty shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you remember when Moses threw down the staff, it turned into a snake, and then he picked it back up, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The same thing kind of happened here. He let his staff go for a very unholy reason.
Yeah.
A sinful reason, according to who God was. Even though we didn't have the law, this was still a sinful act.
Right.
But when he gets it back at the end, after Tamar shows up and says, I'm pregnant with your child, Judah, just in case you're wondering, that was me dressed up.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, the child's father is who owns the staff and the seal that I hold in my hand. And then he breaks down and he realizes, what had just happened there. But God redeems it.
Yeah.
And he says, the ruler's staff will not depart from between your feet, which was kind of a royal statement, how the king would hold his staff.
Mm-hmm.
And it will not depart from Judah, who traded it in for a prostitute.
Yeah.
But I've returned it to you and I've redeemed it.
Yeah.
I'm redeeming your identity.
Yeah.
And I am now going to allow you to hold on to that until you hand it off like a baton to Christ.
Yeah.
At the end of time.
Right.
Not just Christ who came to the cross.
Right.
But what this speaks of, it says and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples or the nations.
Right.
That happens at the end of time.
Right.
So
Right.
think about this. For millennia,
Yeah.
God honors this redemption.
Yeah.
And we know that Jesus initially does come through the
Mm-hmm.
lineage of Judah.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he's called the Lion of the tribe of Judah.
Yep.
But ultimately, he carries this redemption on
Yeah.
for millennia.
Yeah.
And he honors it.
Yes.
And it's not done yet.
Nope.
And the cool thing is that very thing that he traded in, his identity that he traded in for a prostitute,
I know.
it's redeemed, and now it's actually going to land in the hand of Jesus.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
I know. It's a prophetic promise.
It is. And it's our brokenness
Yes.
is healed.
Yes.
And
Yes.
once and for all, everything that we've done in defiance of God's holiness is going to be made right.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, it was made right on the cross, and that's
Yeah.
where it started. And we're here to enforce the work of the cross.
Yes.
But when it's all said and done, this beautiful picture of redemption that's going to happen when the,
Yeah.
when the bridegroom comes to take
Yeah.
the bride away.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
going to be this beautiful picture of intimacy, not the sexual brokenness that mankind has lived in for so long.
I know. I know. This is so emotional for me in that it is just such evidence. It's palpable evidence of the vastness of the Lord's love for his creation.
Yeah.
Just the depth and the breadth of it all. It moves me to tears that, in the imperfection and in the brokenness of people, right? How perfect he is and how he just redeems and follows through on the promises that he has made, that we can stand on that. And yet we would be so sorry. I'm just feeling so emotional about this,
No, it's fine.
that we
Yeah.
would be so willing to throw it away for earthly pleasure that's just so fleeting. It's just
Right.
momentary. And that we can have, the beauty of the healing that he has for us and be able to live in that redemption.
Yeah.
But we throw it away so easily because of our brokenness and the sin that's there. And I'm just going to say it, we just live in a time right now where we want that instant gratification, that microwave. We're living in a microwave mentality, and let's just go through the drive-through. Okay, I can have healing in 6 weeks, and that's even too long. And I'm going, what? Wait a minute. When I hear, 6 weeks, I'm going, how long have you been struggling with what you're struggling with?
Yeah.
There's going to be some work that we're going to need to pull on our big boy pants and our big girl pants, roll up our sleeves. We might need to get in the mud a little bit here.
Well, you're gonna have to, yeah.
You've been living in a lot of pain, but out of pain comes healing. And if you're not willing to move toward it and even sit in it with the Lord, you will be forever in bondage. And that's where the enemy wants us.
Right. Well, in the last segment, you had talked about how you were getting ready to talk to a couple and some marital counseling.
Yeah.
They were coming on to work from the position that we're talking about here. And you said that God just chose that moment right before that happened to bring a memory to mind.
Yeah.
In order to really, what he did that for was to set you free. Right. Yeah. And if you haven't heard the first segment, I would encourage you to go back and hear that. But the same thing happened to me, because in the first segment, as I shared a little bit of my testimony about being heavily bullied in elementary school and always being picked last for the team, and everybody going, oh, great, Reese is on the team. Now we're going to lose the game, and not being emotionally connected to my parents and all that kind of stuff. And then I didn't know ministries like that are out there right now were around.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that there were 12-step groups for this. I never even looked at myself as having an addiction, because in Christian circles, it was just a struggle.
I know.
Right?
Right.
And even a few years after, I actually had to look back in hindsight and go, you know what? I have all the earmarks of having an addiction.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
just know I struggle with porn and I do this. And
Yeah.
I'm in full-time ministry at the
Yeah.
time. And I'm
Right.
leading worship.
Yeah.
And during the week, I'm engaging in pornography and masturbation. And
Right.
I'm losing everything on one
Yeah.
hand. And on the other hand, I'm doing so well. And people have no clue that I'm
Yeah.
hurting inside.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's minimizing language, isn't it?
It is.
I'm struggling.
It is.
It
Yeah.
is. It's very minimizing.
And I
And when,
wasn't doing it to deny anything.
no, of course
It
not.
just didn't dawn on me
No.
that
Right.
I had an addiction to this. That was reserved for
Yeah.
heroin addicts and alcoholics,
Exactly.
and even
Exactly.
workaholics.
Right. Well, and the thing too is that especially in the church arena, there's a and even working with the couples that I have worked with, the amount of shame that is
Mm.
around
Yeah.
this. Now,
Yeah.
that's not from the Lord. He will bring conviction, but he's not going to bring shame, and that's from the enemy. But these men, they're drowning in it, and when they're drowning in it,
Yeah.
that is so difficult for them to even step out and
Mhm.
move toward the healing that's available, because they're believing something that is not true about them. And
Yeah.
so it always goes back to identity.
It does.
Always goes back
Always. You
to
can
that.
always trace this back to identity issues easily.
Always. Absolutely. So, while we've got an epidemic of epic proportions going on right now with pornography and all the escalated behaviors going on,
Right.
the church is remaining silent on it.
They are. I mean, I have my own theories about that, and they're not very pretty. But and I'm not going to rehearse them here, but there's a lot
Yeah.
of fear.
Yeah.
And some of it is that, I think a lot of pastors worry about indicting the men in their congregation, because if they bring it up and then suddenly the wife looks over at the man and, are you doing this? What's going to happen, right?
Right. Well, I have a staggering statistic, and that is 70% of people in churches are struggling.
Yeah, they are.
Not just men, it's the
No.
women as well.
And
Teenagers,
it's a
younger.
growing percentage of women who are finding themselves engaged in that.
Yeah.
And women will come at it from a bit of a different angle,
Mm-hmm.
but it still becomes an addiction for them.
Yeah.
And just, what I was going to say in relation to the story that you told in the first segment, just do a really quick story here that a couple of years ago. So I live in Lakeland, Florida, and we bought this old, what they call a cracker house. It's a term meant for cowboys and the crack of their whip.
Oh,
and
okay.
all over the South, nothing else. And all over the South, you see these things, and they're up on blocks, right? And they're 700 square foot homes, and everybody lived in them, and they were kind of like bunk houses 200 years ago. So this house that we lived in is a similar type of style. It was built about 77 years ago, and so we wanted land, and we got about 1.2 acres. We just wanted to have a small little farm out here that we could grow our own food, et cetera, et cetera. And but the work ahead of us, we had absolutely no concept of the work ahead of us in stripping this out. You talk about a whole podcast segment on just the metaphor of renovation of an old house,
right?
Wrecking your emotions.
Yeah.
But here's what happened, Stacy. So, and this is one of those untimely moments that you're not ready for, but God is ready for it. And on his calendar, this was the day that he needed to touch this deeper emotional side of my life. Like I said, I didn't have all of this work that I could have it before me, like the counseling and all that kind of, just no clue that it existed.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the only thing I knew to do was gather a bunch of men around me who I knew had expressed this about their life in the past and say, let's just hold each other accountable. That was my initial work of freedom and healing.
Mm-hmm.
Was just, I don't know where else to go, but I know that I've got friends that told me they struggle with this as well. So let's walk this journey together. And that's kind of what started me down the road of doing this full time. But a couple of years ago, maybe last year, we were in the throes of it. We're down here in Central Florida, and it gets pretty hot. And we had this little square refrigerator out back on our porch that held all the cold drinks in it. We just working like a dog, panting like a dog, sweating like a dog, everything dog. And you just go out there, and there was nothing like it. You just go in there and grab a Gatorade or whatever it was, and we drink it down. It would be amazing. Well, every once in a while, this refrigerator is just one of those small square apartment things or dorm things. every once in a while, the seal would come apart, and it would cool. It would warm up the drinks inside. It wouldn't get hot, but it wouldn't be refreshing.
Right.
And the reason it did that is because typically it was too full. There's not a lot of room in those refrigerators. You know, you can hardly put 6 cans of soda or something.
Right.
And so what I did is, to make sure that this door did not open, was to rearrange the contents, keep everything away from the door. I shut it and I stared at it. And I stared at it an inordinately long amount of time, because I do not want this thing to come apart, right? And I'm looking at it, it's the end of the day. We're getting ready to go away. We were doing this thing for a while where we lived elsewhere in Florida. We'd come here, stay overnight at a hotel, do some work, go back home. And that was kind of our routine for a while until we were able to move in. So we had all of these little, luxuries, so to speak, around us, that we didn't have to go anywhere and buy a drink someplace, on the spot. So the next day we arrive on the scene. We commence to still, ripping out all the wood and all the stuff from the house, doing this huge reno. And it's really hot. It's probably 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and my wife goes out to get a drink.
It's not refreshing, is it?
Yes, exactly. Any guesses on what might have happened? But so this is and forgive me, I might be tearing up, in a little bit too, because it was a really interesting moment about how God used it.
Yeah.
My wife comes back in and she says to me, "Hey, just make sure that the refrigerator is closed, because when I went out there, the seal was broken and the drinks aren't really, they're cold, but they're not really, really cold, And I said, and here's my trigger.
Yeah.
Here's a trigger for me.
Sure.
And God knows this.
Yep.
And this is one of the things that was bred into me when I was a very young child, that I don't want to look stupid.
Yeah.
I felt very unaccepted my whole life.
Yeah.
Unwanted at times. And when I do something that I think is helping people and it backfires, and it makes me look like I did not take the care and concern necessary to make sure that everything worked out, because that's what happens. People will, "Hey, no, it's not a big deal. It's one of those things that happens. Just make sure." Well, with me, I take it seriously.
Sure.
My whole life I've been that way.
Yeah.
I want to do it right. And that's a hang up too, but
yeah.
I want to do it right, but I also want to be somebody that is seen as having done it right, because I've been seen as somebody who is not wanted or unacceptable.
Right.
And so she came back in and said that to me, and I said, "Hon, I got to tell you, I literally rearranged everything in there and shut the door, and I stared at the refrigerator." I have no clue how long I stared at the refrigerator, but I stared at the refrigerator and I was just daring it to open, right? And she goes, it's not a big deal. And I said, "No, you don't understand." "No, you don't understand. It's a big deal, because I expressed the care and concern that is necessary to make sure that we had these drinks cold for us tomorrow."
Yeah.
I literally went in there and rearranged everything. Nothing was touching the bar on the door. Nothing was even close to it. I shut it. It shut completely fine. And I stared at it. She goes, "No, listen, it's not a big deal. Just remember to do." I said, "I did." And she wasn't being antagonistic.
Yeah. It just wasn't computing for her.
Right.
Yeah.
It didn't have this deep intrinsic emotional explosion need coming to the surface of her life at that time. And she's like, but she kept saying it. Right? She kept saying it. And I said, "But I did." And I said, "You don't understand."
Yeah.
I said, "My whole life has been this way, where I have tried to do what's right. And something happens and it makes it look like it was my fault, when I could guarantee people that everything was fine, and something goes wrong." And I said, "I don't understand why, because everybody will come back and say, 'You know what? You did it right. We should have believed you. But it happens after the fact.
Yeah.
And so in that interim time, I'm left to curse myself over and over and over again, because there we go again. I didn't do it right.
Yeah.
And I just started crying. I started to weep,
Yeah.
Stacy,
Yeah.
because it was a moment in time where I just really felt the finger of God. Like he chose that moment. What a dumb moment, right?
Mm.
He chose that moment in time where I'm sitting there and this house is practically taken down all around me. I'm sweating blood, it seems like sometimes, because that's how hard we worked in this place.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted a cold drink too. And she just walks in and hands it to me, and it was fine, but it wasn't ice cold. But just the fact that she was going, it's no big deal. I said, you don't understand. This is huge. And she wrapped her arms around me and she held me, and I just cried. And I said, I just want to be acceptable.
Yeah.
That's it. And so all that stuff that gets bred into us, right,
Yeah.
Stacy?
Yeah.
All that stuff that gets bred into us as a young child, sometimes we just cast it off and we don't think it's a big deal, but it sits in our soul and it festers.
Boy, does it ever.
And it never gets challenged with anything that's going to help set you free.
Right.
And so every time it comes around full circle, you hit it again, and all it does is reinforce to you the narrative that you are building over your life.
Yeah.
That I'm no good. I don't do anything right. I'm unwanted. I'm unacceptable. Why would anybody, ever want to be in a relationship with me? Anything like that. And everything that goes along with it over time, all the jealousy and the fear and all that stuff that kind of clings to it. It becomes a magnet and starts pulling all of these other negative emotions into it.
Oh, sure.
And then there you are 30, 40, 50 years later.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know any of this stuff existed, and I have done a lot of self work in my life, over the past 10 years, 12 years since I've broken free. But that moment in time, and I've had others where God just decided this was the day I'm going to open you up and I'm going to bring some more healing into your life. And we don't get to choose when that is sometimes.
No.
But I really felt God, and the one thing that was healing to me in that moment was that my wife got it.
Yeah.
She understood.
Yeah.
Because she is one that I always wanted approval from.
Sure.
She began to understand, like, wow, I see the passion that you have to serve me, the passion that you have to serve people.
Mm-hmm.
And you give your all.
Yeah.
And when it backfires, well, if it backfires, it's fine. But when it goes to that next level and all eyes are on me,
Mm-hmm.
and then I feel like a complete failure.
Yeah.
It's a huge, huge trigger. And I know that somebody listening to this right now probably feels that as well.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is that God brought that moment in time, stuck his finger on my soul at that time in order for me to finally let it go.
Yeah.
And say, you know what? I'm going to let the minor things be the minor things. I'm going to focus on the majors and just continue my life and go forward from here.
Yeah.
And if we'll let him do that, if we'll let him open up that pain portal into our life, we will eventually find freedom from our addiction.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
we cannot do it without walking through the pain,
right,
and dropping to our knees and sobbing on somebody's shoulder,
right.
and saying, I hate how this feels,
Yeah.
but I have to feel it.
Yep.
And I have to evaluate it.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I do all that hard work, I can finally get to a place where I can release it and let it go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I tell my clients all the time, you guys are doing the stuff that nobody does.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, that's amazing. That saying, you have to feel to heal.
Right.
And it's really, really true. And that, we do not do healing or experience healing in a vacuum. It is, in the way that we're created, right? We're created to have relationship with the Creator.
Mm-hmm.
And with people. Right. And so, yeah, we are wounded and hurt in relationships, but it's in healthy relationships that we find that healing and that healing with the Lord. When we allow the Lord to enter into those painful places and trust him with that. And then, woo, this is, I tell you, I'm just really emotional today. When we allow, it's just really something else. When we allow the Lord to bring others into that space with us
Right.
where we are accepted just as we are. We're not having to have it all figured out because we won't. We don't have to clean it all up to be accepted, where there's no judgment, but there's a lot of grace that you're met with,
Yeah.
right? It's in that space where the healing can happen.
That's exactly right. Yep.
You know, I went through my entire life too wanting the approval of my mother.
Mm-hmm.
Never got it. Never did.
Right.
She's gone at this point. She's been dead now, since 2017. We were estranged when she passed away, and we hadn't talked to one another or seen each other in those since from 2011 to 2017 from when she passed. So that's another story.
Right.
But, what was really, really hard for me in, wanting that approval was when I came to know the Lord. I was just like, oh dear, I am going to have to get it all together for me to be acceptable.
Mm.
And when I realized that he wanted me just as I was so that he could do that work in me,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that was really freeing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, it's really hard, as a young kid, not feeling that you really belonged in your family. I did. I never felt that I belonged with them. I was never accepted. That's how I felt. And I believe I shared this in a previous segment where my family of origin and the experiences with them were so painful for me that I truly believed that I was adopted, that they were not my real family, and my real parents were out there looking for me.
Mm. Wow.
And I have to tell you, though, my real parent was looking for me. My Abba father was looking for me. He always knew where I was at. He just wanted me to know that he was available and he, that I was his.
Mm-hmm.
And so being grafted in, really that Jewish part of me, was already in the family, so to speak. The Gentile side of me had to get there too.
Right.
But I love that we're adopted into his family. What does that mean? It means we were chosen.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And we're accepted.
Yep.
That language to me is so healing.
Right. And if we could just make the transfer from our own brokenness, where those three things that you just mentioned right there are a struggle for us to feel.
Yeah.
And we can get over to the other side and say, I found it.
Yeah.
I found it. It's a really hard thing to do because it's so intangible.
Yeah.
And we have what I call focused sources of approval. There's people that we absolutely need to have that word of approval from, or we're never going to feel it no matter how many other people say it.
Right.
And, like your mom or my dad,
right.
And, but that's what makes it so hard, is because those are the people we need to hear from before we'll believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could have 50 other people in your life going, Stacy, you're absolutely amazing. Oh my gosh, that podcast you did that one time, or wow, you have such great insight and counseling and all this wonderful stuff.
Right.
But if your mom heard the podcast, or your mom overheard what you were doing when you were counseling somebody, and she brought you out into the hallway one day and said, my goodness, Stacy, what a beautiful lady you've become. Yeah. What a beautiful woman of God you've become. And I'm just so proud of you. Right.
Yeah.
Then we go like, okay, I can be at rest.
Yeah.
But it's demolishing that box of the focused sources of approval.
Yeah.
Recognizing that regardless of who tells us those things anyway, who gives us those praises anyways.
Yeah.
The origin is always the heart of our Father.
Right.
And he uses mom, dad, sister, brother, friends.
Yes.
To speak those words into our life. What are all of these relationships? They're all these incredible pictures of how God relates to us.
Right.
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 So if we can demolish that thing and say, I've had dad issues. And so people that are male leaders,
Yeah.
in my life. I'm going
Yeah.
to attach to them now. I'm going to imprint on them. They're the ones that are going to determine whether I'm happy or not.
Right.
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 And that's pretty much the whole of our life. We got
Yeah.
mommy or daddy issues.
Yep.
We start to imprint on the woman, which guys will do if they've had mother issues.
Sure.
Imprint on the woman. Maybe I can get the accolades from this woman if I have sex with her.
Right.
Or with dad or however those issues come down and however they work out with son or daughter, and then how you try and find what you're looking for everywhere else.
Yeah.
Well, God is just saying, I'm the one that set those things up to impact your life anyways.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for what you're going through right now, let's cut out the middleman for a second.
Right.
And
Right.
just find your completion and wholeness in who I am to you,
Exactly.
because I want to shower you in perfect love. And I'll be honest with you, Stacy, that's still a journey for me.
Sure. It's a journey for me too.
To see God as a loving father.
Yeah.
And think that he absolutely loves me regardless of who I am and what I've done.
Yeah.
I still find times where I don't want to believe it.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, me?
Yeah.
Me? No,
Yeah.
that can't be
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. And he's going, why not you?
I know.
And why not? And why not me? I have this beautiful, I also love though how the Lord uses people to speak to us.
Mhm.
And the message that he sends through other people, and that healing that comes. So recently, like last month, I entered into a new decade of life. I turned 60, and I mean, oh my goodness, it's exciting, it's fun, and this woman, I've spoken about her before. My dear friend, she's one of my best friends, Jordan. She led me to the Lord 27 years ago. I've known her for 28 years. She came to my party, and it meant a lot to me. She is a spiritual mom to me.
Mhm.
And at one point in my at my gathering, people went around and they shared how they knew me.
Hmm.
And it was really sweet. We didn't record it. I don't know what we were thinking. But it's okay. I remember what
I
people
need this. I need this.
I remember what people said. But I'll tell you something, though. The Lord knew exactly what I needed that day.
Yeah.
I never heard either of my parents tell me, we're so proud of you.
Yeah.
Okay, ever. My friend Jordan, she didn't know this, but the Lord knew. She was sharing how we met, and she said to me, she actually said, she shared this, she said, I am so proud of the woman that Stacy has become.
Wow. That's beautiful.
And that was healing from my heart and my soul. And only the Lord knew that I needed to hear that. Yeah. The truth is, I never would have heard it from my mom because of how broken she really was and how hurt she was.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to hear it from my dad either because of his own story of brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to be okay with that. Yeah. And just be able to receive from the Lord, from my dear friend and sister in Christ, what he's been wanting to tell me all along. Right. And even in my dad's illness of Parkinson's and dementia, my dad was a man of very few words. He was such an angry person and very violent at times. And he was at the house for a weekend. My husband and I were caring for him. And in a lucid moment, the Lord knew what I needed again. And I knew my dad was dying. And my father twirled around, not a man of love and demonstrating that, turned around, put his arms around me, and he said, I love you.
Wow.
And I was like, if there's ever any doubt for any of you that are listening or watching that the Lord loves you, I want you to hang on to this. He does infinitely. And, it was just such a healing moment for me because I knew that was the Lord caring so deeply for my heart
Right.
that he would have it come from someone who never said it, ever.
Hmm.
And it was in my dad's illness. And so in that, again, it was like, how do you experience the joy and the healing while you're grieving?
Right.
You can't describe it. You'd have to experience it.
Yeah.
But that's who the Lord is. He just has this way. And I'm just so grateful, just so grateful for, all that he's done, all that he is doing, and in those moments, right, we circling back to identity,
Hmm.
we get to fully experience that we are children of God, that we're his, and a loving father cares for his kids. He cares for his kids. He
Yeah.
loves them. And the way that he does it, there is no earthly person that could ever do what he does.
Right.
But I'm so glad that he does do it in the ways that he does, right, through people, right?
Yeah.
To deliver the message, because maybe it's easier for us to receive it through
Yeah.
someone
Oh,
else,
yeah. I
right?
mean, you're going to pass out dead if you see God in all his glory, right? He's going to like plop. Okay, well, sorry, didn't mean for that to happen. But anybody else out there, right? But that's why he set up these beautiful things. Like, you want to know how intimate I am? Okay, go have sex with your wife.
Right.
I mean, it seems like really weird to say it that way, but it's like, here is an incredible institution I've set up for you to understand what it means to be vulnerable and intimate and unified.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you get to procreate at the same time.
Yeah.
Just like I created you, you get to create others.
Right.
And then
Right.
you've got mom and dad who, if they are in a good place, can mentor you well and continue to give you that real secure attachment.
Right.
But
Right.
if not, God's there to give you siblings or other friends out there who will bring you in and accept you.
Yeah.
And for some people who may not even feel that right now, maybe you're listening and you're younger and you're wondering, is that going to happen to me? Because I've got this past life that just isn't so grand and I don't even know what to do with myself.
Right.
He sets the solitary in families. There's a family waiting for you out there who's going to shower you with love and acceptance.
Yeah.
And it's going to come as a direct result of the Father seeing your brokenness right now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's it. I know I'll say this. I go, I didn't get to choose my family of origin. I didn't. But I get to choose the family that I have now.
Yeah.
I really do. We may not be related by blood, and that really is okay. But we really are connected anyway, through the bloodlines, right? But the church that my husband and I are going to, and the small group that we are a part of. I mean, I've never felt so seen and known in a
That's
short
beautiful.
period of time. And that is just an extension of the Father's love for us. It is in relationships. It is in those healing, healthy relationships that we really get to experience the Lord's love for us and really who we are in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
It's just really something. I become overwhelmed in a good way about it, and I'm like, finally, I mean, when I first came to know the Lord, I was just like, oh dear, here we go. I am on the outside looking in again because of certain things that I heard in church that, said to me, unless you were able to do this,
Yeah.
can't accept you.
Right.
And then I'm just going, why do we do that? It's like, that's not even biblical, folks. Why
No.
are we doing that? Right? Why are we keeping people outside? Right? And so there's that wounding, right, that I've worked through and continue to work through. And again, he just uses broken, flawed, imperfect people to bring about his perfect plan.
Yeah. That'll all make sense one day.
I know. Yeah.
And all we have to do is recognize that we need to assign God to these special moments in our life, as random as they might feel. I have a bunch of other stories that I could bring up that God touched the portion of my soul to bring healing, and I was like,
Yeah.
who?
Yeah.
Why would it happen this way? You know, it would really help if you could just kind of plop off your throne, jump down, give me the inside scoop, and everything will be great. No, it's not how he works.
Nope.
Because he's doing something in us that far exceeds anything that we could even ask or think.
Exactly.
So he's going to do it in a way that keeps us trusting and keeps us dependent upon him.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's where true healing comes, when we are completely dependent on the Father.
Right.
All of the stuff we talked about over these last couple of segments regarding the patriarchs of the family of God, all of that could have been summed up if they just would have trusted God more.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Right. When I look at Moses bringing the stiff-necked people through the desert,
right?
And I'm going, so God was with you by day and by night and provided food for you every single day, and you complained about it.
Not
And
to
then he
mention
gave
that
you this
huge wall of water you walk through.
Right. Yeah, just gave you all. I mean, you're wandering around for 40 years, your sandals didn't, get worn out or any of that. Right? I'm just going, geez, do we not see the miracles in that? Do we not see the love that he has for you? Do we not see that? And the problem is we keep looking back to Egypt, and the Lord is saying, I want you to head toward the promised land because there's so much there for you.
Yeah.
And that's the message, really, to anyone that is struggling with whatever it is that you're struggling with. There's a promised land waiting for you.
Agreed.
He just wants you to keep moving forward and trust him in that. Yeah. Is it in the short run easier to stay where you're at because that is what's familiar and you know how to navigate that more or less?
Right.
It's a lot harder to step into something that is unfamiliar, that you don't know. But here's the thing. If you truly, truly trust the Lord, he will not give you bad things. He's got amazing things available. So is it a risk to move forward in that? Absolutely. It's well worth it, though. I can attest to that in my own life, in the continued healing journey that I'm in, right? I don't want to go back. I know what was there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and why do I want the wilderness when I can have the plush, fertile fields?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's amazing. It's an amazing life. It's an amazing life.
Yeah.
It really, really is. I invite anybody listening into it who may not have joined. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Reese, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I love it. All right. So for those of you that are struggling and you are wanting help, know that is available to you. Contact Reese at his website, thesilentaddiction.com, or email him at reesecrane@gmail.com. Again, that website is thesilentaddiction.com, and email Reese at reesecrane, REESECRANE @gmail.com. And I know that he also provides a free 30-minute consultation. You've got absolutely nothing to lose in reaching out to Reese, finding out what he's got to offer, seeing if this next step is your next step in getting the help and the healing that is available to you, and the freedom that you will have by saying, adios, Egypt. I'm moving into the promised land.
Amen.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. And Reese, I know we'll be talking again.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. All right.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye. You have been listening to True You Ministries with pastoral counselor Stacy Echeverria. Stacy is a licensed pastoral counselor whose own journey has taught her the importance of having a safe place to discuss the harder issues of life. You can learn more about Stacy and her heartfelt desire to help people, much like yourself, who may be at a place of pain and confusion by calling her at 626-461 63344, or feel free to email her at info@trueyouministries.com. Thank you for tuning in today, and we'll be back next week at the same time. May God richly bless you.